Hello everyone and welcome back to another Battle of the Beast video. This is Battle of the Beast in episode number 12 of New Protectors Era edition. And I am Adam, I'm your host Adam, and this is the second battle of the quarterfinals. I butchered that intro horrendously. So with this battle, it'll be another battle between two of the quarterfinalists going, clashing heads with each other, seeing which of these great titans come out on top. And the only thing these beasts have in common is that they are the first book of their respective series. And they have the ability to grow depending on a certain element which they come in contact with. So, yeah, you know what? That's actually pretty good. So, also looking at this matchup, I am still on the fence on what arena to do for these two. But I am leaning towards the clock arena from the Hunger Games Catching Fire. And just because I do that doesn't mean the fight's still going to be obvious. I have a rough idea on how the fight's going to go, and I don't think the arena actually has any part to play in this, or not any important part. But that's why I'm doing that arena, so it can have a part to play. Anyway, so let's introduce these beasts. Representing Series 29, the New Protectors, we have Kalderon the Iron Bear, versus a representative of Series 31, Guardians of Tangala, Lupix, the Ice Wolf. I almost said the Iron Wolf. Would be nice to see an Iron Wolf, but no. Iron Bear, Ice Wolf. This is already confusing. So, like I said, the arena will be the clock arena for the Hunger Games Catching Fire. And with that, let's get to the stats. Kalderon the Iron Bear. Kalderon's abilities are natural weaponry, ignition, and flame aura. Kalderon can coat himself in flames by scratching his claws against his armor. Metal absorption and size enhancement. Kalderon can absorb metal into his armor to gain more power and increase in size. Liquid metal and spark manipulation. Kalderon can release globs of liquid metal and sparks from his fur, which can ignite his surroundings. Heat manipulation. Kalderon radiates extreme amounts of heat, enough to batter people. Fire and lava resistance. Enhanced strength and enhanced durability. Weaknesses are an extreme water weakness and metal absorption limit. Lupix the Ice Wolf. Lupix's abilities are natural weaponry, freeze breath, absorption of water to make her bigger, enhanced strength, durability, and agility. With durability, though, she gains more with more water she absorbs, and with agility, she loses more agility. She loses agility when she gains more. When she absorbs more water. She brings a snowstorm wherever she goes, enhanced hearing and smell, and a cold immunity. Okay, so with the stats department done for both of these beasts, and the arena already picked out to be the clock arena for the Hunger Games Catching Fire, let's get into this battle. As both beasts exit from the chambers, both beasts immediately bound their way out of their chamber along their respective spoke, and instantly their eyes meet before they get to the center island. Kalderon wastes no time by scratching his armor and sending sparks flying everywhere, but also chucking metal globs along the rocky terrain that is the spokes and center island. Lucor stares down at this, realizing that it's definitely going to be hot because liquid metal, come on. And immediately, Kalderon then decides to, with his claws, brings them together, interlocks them, and then closes his eyes before focusing on an intense heat wave that shoots from his body that knocks Lupix back from where he's standing. Lupix gets back up, growling an aggression to that, before looking around on his body, on her body rather, and sees that she's looking. She sees reflections coming off her body, almost like water is coming off her, like she's melting. Lupix realizes that and looks down at the water before dipping her paw in there, absorbing a good amount of water to restore her back to the way she was, but that little bit more water as well, just to build up more durability. As she looks over at Kalderon, snarls before making her way over to him, bounding along the spokes, with her frost breath being used on each of the metal globs of liquid metal that's around the arena. Speaking of which, snowstorm, because she brings a snowstorm. So Kalderon still dragging his claws along his armor, trying to build up sparks, more heat inside of him. He sees that Lupix is just freezing the globs of liquid metal in her way as she charges up towards Kalderon, about to lift up a claw and slash down onto Kalderon. Kalderon immediately lifts up one of his armored arms to deflect it as a big scraping sound that causes all the audience members to wince from the sound, just scrapes along Kalderon's armor. As Lupix then goes for another scratch, Kalderon just deflects back by uppercutting Lupix with his claws up her jaw. They both get knocked backwards from their nasty blow. As Lupix feels like a hot sensation coming from her head, she dips her paw into more water to absorb more of it, to become more bigger, more defensive, but also to freeze up that water. As she looks up at the snowstorm coming down very aggressively, she can see Kalderon just fine. However, Kalderon, with steam erupting from his body as the snow lands on his body and immediately melts and evaporates, he can barely see Lupix through the snowstorm, so he knows he needs to be careful, especially with what's underneath the rocky spokes. He carefully treads his way to the center island before looking around and immediately seeing a pair of glowing blue eyes along one spoke. He wastes no time, and building up a ball of liquid metal, he chucks it towards the pair of blue eyes, in which Lupix immediately jumps over that and bounds over towards Kalderon. As Kalderon's able to see Lupix, Lupix is a lot bigger than what she was before. And immediately, Kalderon lifts up both claws and pushes back Lupix as Lupix is about to pounces on top of Kalderon. Kalderon focuses his heat in his paws as he's pushing Lupix back and bites down into Lupix's neck right here as Lupix is breathing frost over Kalderon. Kalderon's feeling the cold, but is refusing to back down as he's focusing his heat in his paws before shooting a heat wave right at Lupix, knocking her backwards right into the water of the arena. Kalderon hears a splash and assumes that Lupix fell in, which, yes, he assumed correctly. But unbeknownst to Kalderon, though, Lupix is just laughing as she sinks to the bottom of the arena. Unbeknownst to Kalderon, due to how thick the snowstorm is, Lupix is absorbing all the water, becoming bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, becoming more and more powerful the more water she's absorbing. Eventually, the entire all the water in that arena has been absorbed by Lupix. As Kalderon is scratching his armor to build up more heat inside of him and absorbing the metal globs which he has left on the rocky spokes of the arena, becoming bigger and bigger in size, he hears a very loud howl coming from underneath him. He looks down and sees a pair of blue eyes staring right at him, and they are a lot bigger than what they were when they were on the spoke. Kalderon, confused by this, keeps looking down at it as Lupix kind of shimmies his way down to the ground before pouncing up into the sky, lifting up a claw and breaking right through the entire arena before going back down to the ground. Kalderon immediately falls down into the ground, and as he gets up from the large fall, he stares at this behemoth of a wolf made of ice that is staring him, that's just looking down on him. Originally, Kalderon was a lot bigger than Lupix, but now the roles are reversed. Lupix is looking down on this tiny little bear. Kalderon, starting to feel a bit nervous, scratches his claws against his armor, causing more sparks to fly. 2 balls of liquid metal as he chucks it towards Lupix. Lupix dodges. Okay, no, not slower. Lupix gets the metal balls, hits the back of her neck, so the icy mane rather, and another one lands right on her hind leg. Well, not front, hind leg, and immediately she starts growling in pain. as the heat is absorbing, well, not really absorbing, melting away at the ice. As she, in retaliation, charges up towards Kalderon, breathing a ton of ice on top of Kalderon. Kalderon immediately feels the freeze coming from Lupix, freezing his body over. Kalderon, in retaliation, lifts up a claw and slices right towards Lupix's mouth. Lupix gets tons of chips of ice getting knocked away from her as she turns back and bites down onto Kalderon's arm that just scratched him before hoisting him up, lifting up her head and smashing Kalderon down into the ground of the arena before biting right through the arm. Talk about frostbite, am I right? Kalderon roars in pain over this, builds up a ball of metal and slams it right down onto Lupix's head. Lupix is roaring in pain over this, trying to get the metal ball off, and eventually she does. And as she goes to take a step towards Kalderon, she immediately falls to the side, not completely, but lose her balance briefly. As she looks on her paw, she sees that the metal ball is now on her paw. Kalderon realizes that's his advantage. Kalderon realizes an advantage he has. He builds up a metal ball, goes to chuck it at Lupix, who goes to dodge it, but in actuality, Kalderon grabs the ball and absorbs it back into himself. Lupix, confused by this, sees Kalderon does it again, absorbs another ball, absorbs another ball, absorbs another ball. Well, with one paw anyway, because he's lost an arm. Lupix realizes what Kalderon's doing. He's equaling Lupix's power, and Lupix is now on a time crunch. Lupix charges up towards Kalderon, bites into the wrist of his other paw to prevent him from absorbing another metal ball. Kalderon just twists his wrist and slams it into the side of Lupix's face. As the metal ball is melting away at Lupix's face, Lupix bites down with all her might, lifts up a claw and slashes goes to scratch right at the wrist, with the metal ball that was on Lupix's paw absorbing to Kalderon in the process. Lupix realizes that Kalderon is now getting bigger and more powerful as Kalderon bites down onto the back of Lupix's neck, and using all his strength, he hoists Lupix off and chucks her to the side of the arena. Lupix, not backing down, bounds right back up to Kalderon, taking all the hits like a champ as Kalderon goes to swipe at Lupix, and it just chips away at her ice. But she lifts up a claw and slashes right at Kalderon, causing 3 large, deep gashes appearing in Kalderon's armor. And for the first time in this battle, Kalderon roars in pain over those scratches actually penetrating his fur. Lupix realizes that she's still more powerful at the moment. Lupix goes to stand on her hind legs before slashing down towards Kalderon and slashing upwards in the same time as Kalderon deflects the downwards cut, but wasn't fast enough to deflect the upwards cut, which slashes right along here on Kalderon's head. Kalderon roars in pain over this, but doesn't back down from standing on 2 legs with 1 paw and 1 mouth. As Lupix slices down towards Kalderon, Kalderon deflects it and sees the uppercut coming, and he quickly moves his head and bites down onto that paw before using his paw and slams Lupix's leg into the floor of the arena before biting right through it. Lupix roars in pain over this, and in retaliation breathes his icy frost breath over Kalderon. Kalderon feels the heat inside of him starting to cool down now. Kalderon focuses all his heat and forces a heat wave right inside of Lupix. As Lupix and Kalderon start cooling down but also heating up in the process, both beasts roar in pain before backing away from each other. As Kalderon inspects his injuries, he sees blood gushing down him, literally sizzling to the touch as it hits his body. As he looks over at Lupix, Lupix is at this point a mess, with water dripping down her entire body, the metal globs now to her temperature, coming to her temperature now. She's limping from the metal glob that was on her paw, but the metal glob that was on her leg, but still ready to fight and still quite large. Calderon, however, with one paw to his name, for his front legs anyway, he realizes how badly injured he is, but he knows he can't give up. As he scratches his armor again to build up more heat inside of him, he then stands where he is and waits for Lupix to charge at him. As Lupix charges at him, right before Lupix pounces onto him, Calderon angles his claw, aims it right at Lupix's chest, and sends a heat wave right into Lupix, shaking the entirety of Lupix, sending sprees of water everywhere. All the water that lands on Kalderon instantly injures him. Even if just a tiny drop still hurts him immensely. As Lupix gets back up, now even more melted than ever. Not fully melted, but still melting. Lupix notices that Kalderon felt a lot of pain from the water, and Lupix gets an idea and gives a sinister grin before winking at Kalderon with one of her glowing eyes. Lupix then stands on her hind legs before scooping up water from her underbelly and then tossing it towards Kalderon. Kalderon lifts up his arm and takes the water as it splashes onto his armor, causing smoke or steam to erupt, and Kalderon roaring in pain over this. As he puts down his arm, he's immediately greeted by Lupix, lifting up both her claws and bringing it right down onto Kalderon, sinking the claws into his neck. Kalderon's body is melting away at the ice, and Lupix is wincing in pain over this, but knowing that was going to happen, the ice melts into water as the water feeds through Kalderon. Calderon's roaring in pain over this as he's about to bite down onto Lupix. Lupix bites onto Calderon's muzzle, letting the heat flow through him into her mouth as her mouth starts melting away her fangs, as his mouth starts steaming up, erupting into steam, as the water is starting to evaporate inside of him, but not fast enough for him to feel that pain. Eventually, Lupix backs away, losing all of her fangs in the process, and very badly injured. She looks at Kalderon, who's now struggling with all the water inside of him, and all he does is look over towards Lupix, who just breathes frost all over Kalderon, and immediately the ice which has been breathed onto him, that melts as well. And Kalderon immediately feels a gush of water going all over his face, all over his body, as he screeches in pain over this, before slamming into a wall of the arena, knocking himself out. Lupix makes her way over to Kalderon, and seeing that Kalderon is still being injured by the water from the snow that's fallen, she sees that Kalderon's time is almost up, and decides to wait in the snowstorm to let the snowstorm bury him, while she just absorbs the snow that's coming down on top of her, regaining the claws that were on her legs, but also her fangs, as she looks down at Kalderon, who is now... I'm trying to think of a nice way to describe it. But Kalderon is in is now at half the power that he was when he started. With how much water that went inside of him due to Lupix's ice, Kalderon is now a husk of the bear that he was when this battle started. As he looks up at Lupix, pleading for mercy, Lupix obliges, lifting up one claw and smashing it right down onto Kalderon's head, smashing his entire head in, shattering the skull almost immediately. I actually scratched myself in the process. Immediately, Lupix howls into the arena, and the snowstorm gets stronger and stronger and stronger. Eventually, Kalderon's body gets melted up as Lupix pounces upwards, going into the lowest door of her chamber that she can reach, before the chamber doors close and the snowstorm fades away, with only when spectators look down to where Kalderon was, all that can be seen is just a reflection of his armor, shining from being reflected by the snow, but the sunlight there just came out. So that, Lupix has won, Kalderon has lost. If you think Kalderon should have won, please leave in the comments below why you think that, and quite frankly, I wouldn't argue with you. But unfortunately, my word's final, and somehow Lupix won. Right. So this battle, when I first saw it, I thought it was incredibly obvious that Kalderon was going to win, and I generally believed it. I was then proven wrong by science. But the thing is, though, either of these beasts could have won. But the more I looked at this matchup, the more I've realized something that was a glaring weakness for Kalderon. The more I realized, actually, oh, Lupix may win. And the weakness is ultimately Kalderon's weakness to water. It's not just like any regular water weakness, it's an extreme water weakness. One drop is all it takes. And Kalderon goes from walking around, owning the area, to limping. That is extreme. That's what I consider as extreme. And considering Lupix is made up of ice, and ice being frozen water, melt the ice, you get water. And that is Kalderon's weakness. It was a really case of, it was more along the lines of Battle of the Elements here, of fire versus water. And if I may, I'm going to quote a very important line from my favourite episode of Doctor Who. Water always wins. Water's patience, water will wait. Look at everything on the earth. Water erodes away at the rocks along the mountains, takes up most of the land mass on earth. Water always wins. And with that, that's how Lupix won. Not to mention the snowstorm that was coming in was constantly slowly healing Lupix, but it was also slowly damaging Kalderon in the process. Lupix was able to apprehend Kalderon for long enough, and that way the snowstorm would have eventually killed Kalderon. But Kalderon was begging for mercy. Lupix obliged, let herself build up in strength before smashing his skull. Which, by the way, his skull was still radiating some heat. Some of Lupix melted in the process, and that just made it quicker. That just made it easier, or quicker, rather. So with that, yeah, I went into this battle thinking Kalderon was going to win, and that the battlefield would help Lupix, but not in a way where she would win. And Lupix is now a semi-finalist. I have no idea how that happened. I'm not going to complain, but oh my god, okay, I was not ready for that. So with that being said, that's all for this time. If you like what you saw, leave a like, leave a comment, don't forget to subscribe, press that little notification bell down in the corner below, and I'll see you next time.